Here we go. Hassan Piker outs himself as a Zionist. So this is Hassan Piker, nephew of Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, and he is platforming. Yuval Abraham, who is a Zionist. In fact, Yuval Abraham is a Zionist settler. And talking about no other land. So this is who Yuval Abraham is. Yuval Abraham is a Zionist settler. He was born into a Zionist settler family in Bet Asaba. His granddad was from Yemen, and spoke Palestinian Arabic. His granddad was a settler from Yemen. He is Yemeni and Italian, from what I can see about his background. So again, this man is a Zionist settler. Why is this dirty Zionist collaborator, this Zionist Turk, because that's what he is, Hassan Piker, promoting a work by a Zionist settler, Yuval Abraham? Why is he doing that? Oh, and here we have the Good Shepherd Collective, as always, clutch as always, talking about dirty Zionist Yuval Abraham.
Or police department or whatever engage in that are ways that actually you can limit the flow of millions and millions and really billions if we think if we're thinking in terms of all the money that the U.S. government and corporations and stuff like that send into Israel. I think that's extremely important, as we're also seeing. I think that this is under discussed in the U.S. left, but this war has been also very difficult for Israel to wage, and if it didn't have the United States just funneling so many weapons, so much money, they wouldn't have been able to do what they've done. I think that people need to really understand like if you're horrified by the tens of thousands of people that have been killed, the tens of thousands of children that have been killed as well, like there are very material ways that we can work, and we can think strategically on a local level about what those are. And so I appreciate you all like kind of pointing that out and lifting that up. So you had this recent thread that I did want to bring you all on to also talk about, which was about Israeli allies and anti-occupation activists in Israel. And so I wanted you to kind of explain those dynamics a little bit, because I think in the United States, not only most people not have a great handle on nuances within Palestinian society, we also have very poor understanding of, I think, Israeli society. And I think there's even, I hear people say things of like, oh, well, a lot of Israelis oppose what's happening. And I'm like, no, like, as I understand it, the majority of Israelis actually think that Netanyahu, for instance, is not fighting this war harshly enough, right? That there needs to be an even harder line taken on Gaza. And so I think, that's obviously not the whole of society, but it does represent a large percentage of Israeli society. But you're speaking about some different segments, which are segments that might see themselves as so-called allies, which we have ally politics in the United States too, so people understand that concept, I think. And so, yes, say a little bit about kind of what you were directly addressing, and also just help people understand a little bit about kind of who these people are, how significant are they within Israeli society as well?
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks so much for this question, Jared, because I think we can't say enough about it. I think it's really important. And I think we kind of started to get into it a little bit in the last interview, but I'm always happy to talk about it because it's such a prevalent problem. So just like first, because you brought up the bit about there's a large percentage of Israeli society that approves of what's going on or wants it to be even more aggressive. So I got some statistics up. There was a poll in January. At the time, the official number of martyrs that was being reported was 25,000. 88% of Jewish Israelis polled in January believe that the number of deaths is justified. And then in February, there was a poll by the Israel Democracy Institute in which 63% of the respondents opposed a proposal for the state to agree in principle to the establishment of an independent, demilitarized Palestinian state. So I'm not going to go into what even we could imagine would be an independent, demilitarized Palestinian state at this point, or what Israelis might imagine that to be. But I think it's really important because I think there are folks that believe Netanyahu is this fringe, violent, horrible person, and so are the people we named like Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And yeah, we can see how Israelis really think because they show us all the time. And I think they don't just show us all the time in these kinds of polls, right? I mean, one of the things that I think even for me and people around me that was surprising maybe is kind of realizing how deeply entrenched all Israelis are, in their connections to the genocide machine that's ongoing. Because even if you yourself, obviously not you, but even if an Israeli themselves is not, in Gaza or part of the machinery or in the military, everyone has a family member who is in the military, was in the military, they were in the military, or in another way in civil society, they're supporting what's happening. So even for the folks who we might consider like the fringe left, there are all of these structural connections and folks that are not going out of their way to distance themselves from that, to condemn that, to express, aggressively, or, I don't want to say aggressively, but to express very clearly their opposition to that, are not, are not opposed to it in practice. So I think that's just like important to say. But the threat itself was in response to a post, a really long post by an Israeli journalist who's reached some prominence before October 7th, but especially in the last few months, about, it was on I think it was on the 7th, and so they were reflecting on what's happened since then, and started off by making it about themselves and the people they knew who had been personally affected and condemning Palestinian armed resistance. And we're 6 months into a genocide. I think the number is 34,000 Palestinian martyrs at this point that's confirmed. We know thousands more that just haven't made it to a hospital, bodies haven't been discovered. I think a lot of people were really upset by the framing to begin with, but also this equation of Palestinian resistance and Israeli genocide was just really jarring. And so sort of the background behind that is that there's this idea that there are Israeli leftists or Israeli non-Zionists or anti-occupation activists or whatever. And it's not just here, but because you said a lot of folks aren't familiar with the context, I think it's important to talk about here. And it's also not just Israelis. I mean, we're using the term Israeli loosely because it includes Americans and, other Westerners, mostly Americans, Canadians, people from the UK, Australia, who come here and take citizenship, right? Like yesterday, and now they're Israelis today. That are part of this mechanism of peace building and solidarity and co-resistance on the ground. And in principle, they might provide some material value, right? In terms of journalism about villages that are going to be displaced or are displaced, about settler violence. Of course, they always differentiate between what is settler violence in the West Bank and themselves, who reside in stolen Palestinian homes in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. And so they create this binary of like good Israeli, bad Israeli, which we talked about in that Ebb article. That I can be a settler and at the same time be on the side of Palestinians and not address any of the material resources that I'm personally benefiting from through theft, that my family has been benefiting from through violence. And there are a number of organizations. So, like, just to name some of these organizations, there are organizations on the ground like the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, like Achvat Amim, but there are other like normalization organizations that benefit from these interactions, like Combatants for Peace, Seeds of Peace. I'm trying to think if there are any others that I really want to name at this moment. I'm sure they'll come to me. But so, there's a whole like funding scheme around these folks, and they're always engaged in normalization, and they're always peace now. Thank you, Benna. Peace now. And they're B'Tselem, and they're always engaged in this like funding scheme where they have to have Palestinians, right? Because they're peace organizations, so they have to have Palestinians. They find vulnerable Palestinians who they can, who are willing to say things for protection, for funding, for all of these different material resources. And then they get to, come online and have clout or, publish articles, and they build their brand off of these connections. A lot of these journalists who benefit from this role as like Israeli leftist or whatever, and get to travel and get to make a lot of money and get to make documentaries and get to, have their name in fancy magazines and newspapers. They're only able to do that because they are associated with Palestinians, right? And so they create this career very much off of the back of Palestinians, off of the violence that's imposed upon us. While, like, it's not just that they're not personally targets of this violence on the structural level, but they are actually receiving privileges from this violence as settlers, right? And so they build these careers, and then they build this clout, and then they go on to say things like this. And it's not just this journalist, I'll just say his name, Yuval Abraham, who made this tweet, but it's a number of people, and it's not just Israelis. Because other organizations in the United States and the UK, for example, if not now, Breaking the Silence is another good one. Na'amod in the UK, they use these same figures as like redemptive Israeli leftists or whatever, and like place their voices, their narrative on the same level with Palestinians, even though Palestinians are the colonized party, the oppressed party, the party that is seeking liberation. So it's really very upsetting, not only because it's built off of this violence of like stealing wealth, stealing privileges, stealing resources, but it also is maintaining this theft because they personally become wealthy and voices that are privileged and that get to then, in the case of Yuval, condemn Palestinian resistance, right? Now, yeah, I think I'll end it there because...
So, Yuval Abraham, Zionist settler. He's built his career off of profiting off of settler colonialism and profiting off of genocide. So why is, and again, he lives on stolen Palestinian land in Qudus. He was born as a settler from Yemen and from Italy. And he made a film. He's a Zionist settler, but he made a film. Right? Again, why is Hassan Piker making or doing an interview on a film which was partially directed by a Zionist settler with Zionist collaborators? These people here, they collaborated with Yuval Abraham. They're Zionist collaborators. Again, Hassan Piker is a Zionist. Hassan Piker is a Zionist. Hassan Piker will sell you out. Hassan Piker is a bougie Turkish trust fund baby. And again, I have implicit bias against Turkey because of the Ottoman Empire. But dude, why are you interviewing literal Zionist collaborators who collaborated with Zionist Yuval Abraham, who's a Zionist settler whose family is from Yemen and Italy, and who enlisted in the IOF? And it don't matter if he left after a week. The fact that he listed in the IOF, that's a red flag. We do not redeem. This is like the Kit Boga, where Kit Boga outed that scam artist from India, and this scam artist was like, do not redeem. This is like this situation, Hassan. Do not redeem, Pajit. Do not redeem, right? Do not redeem. This is that kind of situation where you do not redeem, right?
Roads, military bases.
Why are you platforming? Why do you have on your show these Zionist collaborators who literally worked with the Zionist settler? This is no other land. You have Basal Adra, you have Hamdan Balal, Yuval Abraham, and Rachel Shore. Why are you platforming Zionist settlers? Rothlander, Julius Pollux, Rothlander, that sounds like a Zionist. And the fact that they were on the production team, on the editing team, editing team, I think. Two of the producers of this film were Norwegians, and about the Oslo Accords, and Norway has always sold out Palestine. That's why I have a family-wide travel ban for all my relatives on Norway. Why are you interviewing Zionist collaborators who worked with a literal Zionist settler on a film? And look at this. Hassan has Obama with the Queen on a poster in the background, and he has Bernie Sanders, and then he has a photo of a dog. Like, how in any way is this halal decorations? How in any way is this halal decorations, Hassan? Again, with Zionist settlers, you kind of have to take the Kit Boga rule into effect. Do not redeem, Pajit, do not redeem, right? Do not redeem. So, yeah, there you go. Hassan Piker caught collaborating with Zionist collaborators. Again, these men worked with this guy, Yuval Abraham, Zionist settler from Yemen. All right? This is who he got caught working with. Again, Hassan Piker, do not redeem, Pajit, do not redeem, right? This man is a Zionist collaborator. Zionist clown. And then he's hyping up the video in a previous video. Again. And even Dropsite, look at this. Dropsite says, look, this is a Zionist normalization project. Palestinian Zionist Collective, that's a Zionist normalization project. Again, Hassan, with liberal Zionists, you know what we say? Do not redeem, Pajit, do not redeem, right? Do not redeem, right? It's the do not redeem, like from the Kit Boga video with the Indian scam artist. It's do not redeem, right? So there you go. Hassan Piker is a Zionist collaborator. So there you go.